Joining us now is Trump's national security advisor from his first term, Ambassador John Bolton. Mr. Ambassador, so grateful to see you. Thank you for being here. Were you surprised that President Trump took such decisive action?
Well, let me say this unequivocally. I think President Trump made the right decision for America to attack Iran's nuclear weapons program. And I think we're on the verge of potentially seeing regime change in Iran as part of that. I think this is a huge change in the Middle East. It was a decisive action. It was the right thing to do. I thought somebody should do it for a long time, but better late than never.
Why do you think it is that President Trump did this now? Obviously, the Prime Minister of Israel, Benjamin Netanyahu, has been pushing to do this for years, including when Trump was president the first time.
Right. Well, I think because of the launching of Iran's war against Israel on October the 7th in 2023, it was going to come down to this at some point anyway. This is Iran's effort to go after the little Satan, and the next target was the big Satan. So Israel really faces an existential threat from a nuclear Iran. But Iran is not just Israel's problem. Iran is the world's problem. It's particularly the U.S. problem, and we have now acted against this nuclear proliferation threat. It's clearly the right thing to do, and if Netanyahu is going in first, help persuade the president, so much the better.
So you've obviously been in these rooms. You've seen how President Trump makes decisions. We heard late this past week that it was going to be a 2-week timeline. Do you think, considering the timing of this, that 2-week timeline was just a ruse?
Well, he said up to 2 weeks, and I thought that was a pretty clear giveaway. As I say, I would have done this a long time ago. We'll see what happens now. This is only day one, and I think how Iran responds to this, if they're foolish enough to attack American positions, American personnel in the Middle East or anywhere around the world, what happened overnight would just seem like the beginning.
So speaking of retaliation, I mean, how do you expect Iran to retaliate? What are, in your view, their list of options, and what is the most likely thing to happen next?
Well, they've got a large range of options, but the most important thing is what happens inside Iranian decision-making. So far in this war, since October the 7th, they've only had one military adversary, and that was Israel. And in fact, when Iran launched the first ballistic missile attack in human history against Israel, the Biden administration restrained Israel's response. And even the second response in October was somewhat restrained. I think if I were an Iranian general now, seeing my terrorist proxies pounded by Iran, seeing the Assad regime in Syria fall, seeing my ballistic missile and nuclear weapons programs lying in ashes, I'd be saying to myself, do I really want to take on a second military adversary in the form of the United States? They need to think about it long and hard, because if they do, whether they try to close the Strait of Hormuz, whether they attack American military deployments or American civilian personnel, whether they attack oil infrastructure among the Gulf Arabs, whether they carry out terrorist attacks around the world, at that point, neither Donald Trump nor any other American president has any option but brutal force against the Iranian regime.
Well, to that point, I mean, what is the risk that the U.S. gets drawn into a wider, deeper conflict that potentially involves boots on the ground?
Well, I don't think there's any question of boots on the ground. The only conflict, there's only one adversary we face here, and that's Iran. And their military capability is being decimated as we speak. I think the regime is very vulnerable. I've called for regime change for a long time. I think the regime is weaker now and was weaker before October 7 than at any point since 1979. And every day that goes by, every military commander who's killed, every piece of ordnance that's destroyed leaves that regime weaker. The populace of Iran has seen this regime as in it for themselves for a lot of reasons: the corruption, the self-enrichment of the Ayatollahs and the top generals, the economic misery across the country, the discontent of the youth. Population under 30 is over 60% of the total population. They know they can have a different kind of life. And since the Mahsa Amini murder 2 years ago, 50% of the population has basically demonstrated they don't think the Ayatollahs really do speak with the word of God when it comes to female dress codes. This regime is in trouble, and after last night, it's in even more trouble.
You, of course, have personal experience with this. You were the target of an assassination attempt. The president stripped your Secret Service, your law enforcement protection when he came into office. Do you face greater risk today from the Iranians, and do others who face similar personal threats on American soil face greater threats today?
I think we do. I think it's not just me, of course. It's a list of people that the Iranians have targeted. And it's not just present and former government officials. It's Iranian Americans, people in the Iranian diaspora. This is a terrorist regime. And it started with the attack on the American embassy in Tehran in 1979 when they took our diplomats hostage. It continued with an Iranian-backed attack on the American embassy in Beirut in the summer of 1983, an Iranian-inspired attack on the Marine barracks in Lebanon later that year, and a whole series of Iranian attacks against American military forces in Iraq and Afghanistan. This regime is a threat to international peace and security, and until it goes, there will never be a foundation for peace and security in the Middle East.
All right. Ambassador John Bolton, very grateful to have you on the show today, sir.
Thanks for having me.
There still is a lot of public anger unloading here on the streets of Tehran. Thousands of people have come here to Revolution Square, first and foremost to criticize U.S. President Trump and to vow revenge for those strikes on Iran's nuclear facilities. One of the interesting things that we're seeing on the ground now here is that it's not only conservatives and hardliners who are here, but also people who say they're normally quite critical of the Iranian government.
Even if missiles rain down on my head, I will stay here, she says, and I will sacrifice my life and my blood for my country. This member of parliament says a lot of those standing here chanting slogans against the United States may have been critics of the policies of the Islamic Republic. But today, all of us are standing in one line behind the supreme leader.
People now chanting death to America here at Revolution Square, and you can really feel how angry a lot of them are towards President Trump. Of course, the Iranian government has said that it reserves the right to retaliate for those strikes on the nuclear facilities, saying that it is their right to have nuclear enrichment, it is their right to have a nuclear program, and it's not something that they're going to allow the Trump administration to take away from them. And that is certainly also the sentiment that we're seeing here on the streets of Tehran.